The Spanish conquest of Americas is one of the most brutal chapters of human history. A conquest that saw tortures, rapes, and ethnic genocides never seen before in human history. Today, we are going to talk about one such chapter from the Spanish conquest. The story of an Inca queen who had to suffer great violation, humiliation, torture, and a brutal death at the hands of the Spanish. Let's begin with the story. Cura Ocllo's ascent to the role of queen in October 1533 should have marked the beginning of a luminous reign beside her husband, Manco Inca Yupanqui. But what followed was a tale of unspeakable betrayal and anguish that forever darkened the legacy of the Inca Empire. Her name became etched not in glory, but in the sorrow of a nation brought to its knees. Manco Inca, though titled the Sapa Inca, was but a pawn in the hands of the Spaniards. His appointment as ruler of the Cuzco region was a calculated maneuver, a facade of continuity for the once mighty empire that now groaned under the weight of Spanish conquest. Yet, Manco did not rule, he performed, his every move dictated by the conquistadors who had devastated his land. Beside him stood Cura Ocllo, a queen of extraordinary grace and intelligence, who bore the weight of her people's suffering. In 1535, the birth of their son brought a flicker of hope to their world. The infant represented the lineage of the sun, a promise that the Inca bloodline might endure the tempest of colonial oppression. But even the joy of motherhood could not shield Cura Ocllo from the atrocities that unfolded in Cuzco. The departure of the Spanish governor to Lima in late 1535 left Juan Pizarro, a brutal and arrogant conquistador, in charge of Cuzco. Pizarro harbored a deep disdain for Manco, viewing him not as an ally but as a tool to be used and discarded. Under his rule, abuse became the law of the land. The Spaniards' appetite for violence knew no bounds. They subjected the royal court to indignities unimaginable in the Inca world. Noblewomen, princesses, and even sacred priestesses of the Sun Temple were abducted and raped. According to Spanish reports, not one single woman or sister of Manco was left unviolated. These violations were not merely acts of lust but deliberate assaults on the fabric of Inca society, aiming to strip the people of their spirit and identity. The final blow came when a group of Spaniards demanded Cura Ocllo herself. Her beauty, wisdom, and status as queen made her a coveted prize for men who saw her not as a human being but as a trophy to dominate. Manco, desperate to protect his wife, devised a desperate plan. He dressed one of his most beautiful concubines in regal attire and presented her as the queen. But the Spaniards, leering and suspicious, saw through the ruse. Again and again, Manco offered substitutes, women from his court, even his own sister Ingwil, disguised as Cura Ocllo. Each time, the Spaniards rejected the offering, their demands growing more insistent. For days, Manco stalled, his heart breaking as he realized the futility of his efforts. Finally, the inevitable came. Manco was forced to surrender Cura Ocllo to the conquistadors. The queen was dragged to the Spanish palace, where she was brutally violated and held captive. Stripped of her dignity, she endured unspeakable torments, all while knowing her suffering was part of a larger assault on her people. Manco, meanwhile, had fled the confines of Cuzco, retreating to the rugged mountains and valleys to wage a rebellion against the invaders. His fury boiled over when Spanish messengers, sent to parley, were killed by his forces. The Spaniards, enraged by this defiance, sought retribution. Cura Ocllo, already a prisoner, became their sacrificial victim. The queen was taken to the Yucca Valley, where her execution would serve as a grim warning to all who dared oppose Spanish rule. Stripped of her garments, tied to a stake, and surrounded by jeering soldiers, Cura Ocllo faced her death with unyielding resolve. Her tormentors loosed their arrows, one after another, piercing her body as the lifeblood of the Inca Empire ebbed away. In her final moments, Cura Ocllo stood as a symbol of a broken yet unbowed people. Her death was not just the end of a queen, it was the shattering of a legacy, the extinguishing of a flame that had burned brightly for centuries. As the last arrow struck her, silence fell over the valley. The Spaniards, drunk on power and cruelty, had claimed their revenge. But in the eyes of the Inca people, Cura Ocllo's martyrdom became a rallying cry. Her death, though shrouded in tragedy, reminded them of their undying connection to their ancestors and their land. Manco Inca would continue his resistance in Vilcabamba, waging a guerrilla war that kept the dream of independence alive for decades. But the memory of Cura Ocllo remained his deepest wound, a reminder of the heavy cost of resistance and the unfathomable cruelty of their oppressors.